What's up, DIYers? Today I'm going to run you guys through how I maintain all my aquariums. I only have 4 up and running right now, but these can get out of hand really quickly, especially with live plants. So let's start with the 2 tanks I have in my fish room. The 55-gallon planted tank, which is like my absolute baby. And then we have the 20-gallon guppy tank that is an absolute jungle. So since these are so close to each other, I usually drain them at the same time. I'll gravel vac any poop and debris off the 55-gallon tank, and then I move on to the 20-gallon and start doing the same. Since these are both heavily planted tanks, I don't really have to gravel vac too much. But I, of course, want to get the visible debris out of the tank. Doing these both at the same time not only saves me a bunch of time, but also a lot of energy and effort. 100% worth getting another gravel vacuum if you don't have multiple. I usually do about a 25 to 30% water change on these tanks every single week. It's probably not necessary since they're both heavily planted. I don't test my water, so I do this just to be safe. Before you come at me for not testing my water, I've been doing it for 8 years straight with no problems whatsoever. Now, of course, in certain situations, it is necessary to test your water, but on an everyday basis, when everything's healthy and thriving, there's no reason. I used to bucket fill my tanks, but that takes so much time. Honestly, is so messy and just freaking annoying. So I got a long enough hose to where I can bring it inside and fill up the tanks that way. This saves me so much time and energy, and is just so much easier than buckets. Another thing with weekly water changes, it helps me keep up on the algae on the glass. There's almost never algae on the glass since I do it every single week. I usually only scrape the front of the glass. I like to keep the back and sides covered in algae, not only for my pleco, but just because algae is beneficial to the aquarium. Now, this 20-gallon is super easy to maintain just because I have so many floating plants and submerged plants. There was a lot of guppies in here and it was slightly getting out of hand, but I just recently moved all the fry into a new tub. This definitely helped with maintenance and water quality. Now that there's less fish, it is way easier to maintain. The little tub that I moved the guppy fry into, this thing is absolutely filled to the brim with plants, so I don't do water changes, but of course I need to top the water off from evaporation. I kind of treat it as a pond, and since there's so many plants, I seriously never have to do the water changes. There's so much water volume, plus the fish are really small, and like I said, there's a ton of plants sucking up all the nitrates. But like I said earlier, if there's ever any issue or anything, of course I'd test the water and change it if I needed to. But right now, all these little guppy fry are absolutely thriving and doing great in their new home. Honestly, this thing is super easy to maintain. If you're growing out or breeding fish, I highly recommend it. Now moving on to my fiance's little 5-gallon beta tank. This tank's a little different. Since it's so small, I like to do it twice a week. Sometimes I can push that to once a week since there's so many plants in here like the rest of my tanks, but usually with smaller tanks, you gotta do more water changes. There's just less water volume to work with, and a lot of people think that smaller tanks will be easier, but since there's less water volume, there's less water to actually dilute all the nitrates and ammonia. This is why larger fish tanks are actually easier to maintain, because the more water volume, the less ammonia and nitrates are going to affect your fish. So just keep that in mind next time you think about getting a small aquarium. One thing I will say about small aquariums is obviously the maintenance does take less time, but you just have to do it more often. So all my tanks are obviously planted, but the only one I fertilize is the 55-gallon. I like to use this liquid fertilizer from Chem. I also like to use root tabs. The 2 main reasons for that are 1, because this is my display tank, and 2, some of these plants in here are a little bit more picky than the rest of my plants. Overall, this is just my favorite aquarium, so I try to take the best care of it. Not that I neglect the others, but as far as plants go, I like to give these guys a little bit of boost. I'd like to eventually get aqua soil in this tank and get rid of the sand, as well as maybe get some CO2. Right now, what I'm doing is working. Some of the plants are suffering a little bit, but the majority of them are doing pretty well. As for the guppy tank, like I said, this thing is a freaking jungle, so I kind of just let it do its own thing. I obviously do my weekly water changes, but the plants themselves, I just let them grow. And as you can tell, the floating plants absolutely took over this tank. Having so many live plants really does help with the maintenance, and it's one of the many reasons I love having live planted tanks. Now let's move on to my 36-gallon Bowfront aquarium. This thing I'm having a little bit of trouble with. I just honestly don't love the scape, and I don't love the fish. I'm still trying to decide what to do with this thing, but obviously for now, same maintenance schedule, once a week water changes. This one does have quite a few small fish, so the bio load can get pretty high. Sometimes on this tank I'll do like a 30 to maybe 40% water change, but all the fish are doing well. I haven't lost any fish since a couple months ago when I had an ick outbreak, but we fixed that and all the plants and fish bounce back really well. Plants on this tank is a little bit harder than the rest of my tanks just because it's a little bit more stock than the rest of them. It's still fairly easy and straightforward. Gravel vac anything that I can see. Also with this one I sift through the sand a little bit more than the rest of the tank, because honestly these fish sometimes leave food behind. Those line sharks and the guppies, these, they eat every single drop of food that I put in their tanks. It's kind of funny when you start to notice things like that. Certain fish will eat every drop of food and others will just leave it behind. Unfortunately, still having a little bit of a snail problem in this tank. I haven't put too much effort into trying to get rid of these guys. I've honestly just been manually removing them as I do water changes. There's no real harm in having them in the tank, but they are kind of ugly. I've been feeding way less, and like I said, I do water changes every single week. I might just get some assassin snails or something because these things are so ugly to look at and I am pretty sick of them. But like I said, I might redo this whole tank, so who knows what the future holds for it. Kind of envision this tank with some large rocks in the center, just something that's more, I don't know, right in your face, maybe less plants and more rockiness. I already have a planted tank that I'm obsessed with, so I kind of feel like I should just scrap this one and maybe start over. If you guys have any suggestions for the scape or the fish that I should add to this tank, let me know in the comments. Don't get me wrong, this tank is pretty cool and I do love some of the fish that are in it. It is still very fascinating to sit here and watch this thing, but after a while, I don't know, I just feel like I got sick of the fish and the scape. Now that we got all the water changes done and I kind of ran you guys through my simple maintenance plan, I'm going to show you the results of what taking care of your fish tanks really looks like. If you noticed today, I didn't clean any of the filters. I'll usually clean the filters about once a month. For the canister filter, usually about every other month. Unless your filter is clogged or really dirty, there's no reason to clean it every single time you water change, especially if you do it once a week like I do. But this is the method that works best for me. This is how I keep my tanks looking as good as they do. Water always crystal clear, fish happy and healthy, plants thriving. And that's the main reason I do it on a week-to-week basis, just because it works for me and my tanks and it also keeps everything healthy and established. But I've also made it super simple and just really easy to get it done all at once. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and maybe you learned a thing or two. If you did, make sure to drop a like and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this.